There we go. Okay. Right. Well, thank you very much, Helen, and thank you everyone for joining today. I have the next hour of your time. I'm going to be delivering 4 different sections on the detail of the application and the grant process, and some best and worst practice examples for grant applications. We're going to go through it so that it can be broken down into 4 different shorter videos, so that if you feel the urge to watch again, you can go straight to the section that's most relevant to you. And I will be stopping for questions at the end of each section, and Liz from the team's agreed to help coordinate those for me. So we start off with a high-level overview of the process. Ant has been through this on his slides, so I don't tend to spend too long running through this. It is a fairly straightforward process with a pre-qualification leading on successful completion of that to an application process. It's all done online, so it's all through an online portal. And as Ant said, the pre-qualification will close on the 27th of May. Questions relating to the scheme, the deadline for those is the 30th of May. So if you pre-qualify at the end of the pre-qualification stage and you still have questions, you'll still have time to ask them. The 7th of June, 5 p.m. is the deadline for submission through the portal. Following that, so the 8th of June, all the way through the rest of June and into July, will be the internal assessment, scoring and the grant panel meeting. And you will have been notified of the outcome by the 1st of August. So on or before the 1st of August, you will hear from OxLEP to tell you whether or not your application has been successful. We'll then proceed to the grant agreements, and our aim is to have all of those issued by the 31st of August. Hopefully quicker, but we do appreciate that that is the summer holiday. And then you move into delivery, as Ant says, with closure by the 31st of January for all claims, and then following up with impacts and case studies through February and March. But to jump straight in, PQQ process, pre-qualification questionnaire. This is the gateway to access the application form. It's through an online portal, as I've said, and essentially it confirms your eligibility to receive the grant. The little image on the right-hand side shows you what you will find when you follow the link into the PQQ. And really what we're checking are things like location. So are you based or trading in Cherwell? How long have you been trading there? Whether or not you can actually receive the grant, that's through the UK subsidy controls. As Ant said, we'll be very surprised if anyone doesn't pass that test, but I'll come on to that in a later slide. Sets out the value of the grant you're applying for, your anticipated start and end dates, and a brief description of the project, as well as saying which of the CBAF priorities you relate to. It also includes contact details. That's pretty crucial because those contact details are the ones we will use to send out the links to the application form. Really, this is designed to save you time, to make sure that nobody fills out an application form and at that stage, once they've spent the time filling out the application, discovers that they're not eligible to receive a grant. We've already had a question on whether sole traders are eligible. Yes, they are. The application form will ask for a company number, but it also has a tick box for whether or not you're a sole trader. As I mentioned in the answer earlier, we will need to evidence your status as a sole trader to make sure that you've been trading for more than a year in Cherwell, but sole traders are absolutely eligible for this. And as I said before, closing date for the PQQ, 5 p.m, 27th of May. Although, as Ant said, we will be monitoring the responses that we get. If we are completely overwhelmed with responses, we do reserve the right to bring that date forward, but we will notify everyone. In terms of the CBAF priorities, all of the applications must deliver against one of the CBAF priorities. I'm not going to read them all out. They're on the slide. They're also in the guidance notes. But you can see the various different areas that are priorities for this scheme. If you do not deliver against any of them, then your project is not eligible. So you have to be able to tick at least one of these CBAF priorities in order to have a project that is in scope for CBAF. That is not to say that you will necessarily gain a benefit if you tick all of them rather than one or two of them, because the ones that you tick have to be realistic and relevant, and you'll need to explain how you will deliver against them. So once you pass the pre-qualification questionnaire, you will receive a personalized link to the application portal. Again, there's a little screenshot on the right-hand side. This link will be emailed roughly 2 to 3 days after you've completed the pre-qualification questionnaire. And this application form includes the full project details, the final project details, so accurate start and end dates, accurate project costs. It includes the 4 scored assessment questions. It includes space for you to upload copies of quotations and an optional equalities monitoring section. We're preparing a template in Word that you'll be able to use to draft your answers to the narrative questions. As I mentioned in a later slide, the portal itself does not have a save function. It's 3 pages long. It does need to be done in one go. So we're going to prepare your Word template, or we have prepared your Word template that you'll be able to use to draft your answers. So it becomes, for the areas that would require a lot of typing, it becomes a simple copy and paste exercise. And the deadline, as we mentioned a couple of times, 5 p.m, 7th of June. You must have pressed the submit button and received the little notification that says, congratulations, you have submitted by 5 p.m. on the 7th of June. So in terms of the specific questions that are going to be assessed and scored, these are all set out in the guidance notes. And I've pulled those out, and the red circles on the next few slides indicate the questions that we are asking you. So the top box is the high-level questions. So in this case, we're looking at grant project and delivery for question 1. There's a word limit for all of the questions. This question has a 1,000 word maximum word limit. The question that we're asking you are to describe the objectives of your proposed project, describe the project itself, what is it, and describe how you will implement and manage the project, how are you going to deliver it. So those are the 3 key things that we're asking you as grant applicants to CBAF to explain to us. The next box down highlights the questions that the assessors are asked. So we always provide you with the questions that you're asked to respond to, and we provide you with the guidance that the assessors have in order to score the answers that you've given. So assessors will be looking at things like how clear and well structured is the project? Have you explained what you want to do? Is there a clear plan? Do we actually understand what the grant project involves? This section is the highest weighted section of the grant application. It comes in at 30%, so it's the highest weighted section. It's also the longest of the 4 narrative questions that we provide, or we request, sorry. The second question asks about the impact of the grant on your business. This one has a word limit that's half the size, 500 words maximum here. And this is where you will select from a drop-down list the CBAF priority or priorities that your project will address. And you will then be answering the extent to which the grant will help you to mitigate impacts of COVID and enable sustainable growth. So this funding is related to COVID, but it's also related, as Robert said, to sustainable growth. You'll also need to look at the extent to which the project is supporting the creation of new jobs or safeguarding existing jobs. Again, it's all part of the impact on your business. In terms of the assessment, we're looking at how significant that is based on your current situation. So it's what impact will this grant project have on the business compared to where it was before the grant project? And also how far you're addressing the CBAF priorities that you have said you're going to address. The weighting for this section is 25%. Let's turn my speaking notes over, which makes it easier. It's 25% for this one. Third question that we ask, also 500 words, asks about the impact of the grant on the wider economy. So what we're thinking about here, we've looked at the impact on your business. We're now looking at the impact of this particular grant project on Cherwell and Oxfordshire. So how will the project have an impact on Cherwell and Oxfordshire? What benefits are there to the local and wider economy from this project? The assessment questions, as you would anticipate, look at how significant those impacts may be, both on Cherwell and on Oxfordshire, and potentially beyond Oxfordshire, if relevant, and the extent to which these impacts seem realistic and achievable. So the crucial thing here is not just that there will be some significant impacts, and they're great, it's that these great impacts are realistic, and here's how they will be achieved. So you need to justify the impacts that you anticipate from the grant project. Again, the weighting for this section is 25%.
James?
Question 4.
James,
yes.
Are you able to click the hide button so we can see a little toolbar on your screen that's covering the weighting?
I didn't realize that you couldn't see it either. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, I should go back just to prove that they do say what I said they say. There we are, weighting 25% for question 3. Question 4, along with a note to James about how much he doesn't like Zoom. Value for money and added value. This is the shortest of the questions at 250 words. And that's because we look at some additional elements beyond the narrative question. So the question here is demonstrate how your project offers value for money for the public investment. And what is the added value of the investment? What else does the grant bring to your business? What would happen without the grant? Now, we also, as part of this, look at the quotes and the company contribution, so the match, if there is any, if applicable. And the assessors are asked to consider things like whether the costs are supported by at least one valid quote. So that helps us to assess the value for money of the project. It is possible that there may be quotes missing. You might not have 3 quotes. You may not even have 1. Is there an explanation, a reasonable explanation to explain why? We need to be clear whether the costs that are going into the grant include VAT or not. And all of this helps us to judge the extent to which the project offers good value for money. There's a question about whether match funding has been secured and evidenced. If you're telling us that you're bringing match funding into the project, there will be within the application form a space for you to upload evidence of that match or an explanation for where it will come from. There's also a question about how the business was prior to the pandemic. Again, this goes back to the COVID focus, or the partially COVID focus of the funding, and how you've responded to it, and whether the financial forecasts seem reasonable. So essentially, the assessors are judging how significant and realistic is the impact of not receiving the grant, which sounds slightly counterintuitive, but what we're effectively saying is what happens with the grant. So this is the previous questions. So what happens without the grant? And therefore, what is the added value of the public investment? This section is weighted down at 20%, so it's the lowest weighting of the sections. In terms of additional uploads, I've talked about copies of quotes being uploaded. There is scope for you to upload up to 3 quotes for each of your individual costs within your application. We would expect to see at least 1 to validate the costs and the value for money element. Although, as I say, it may not always be possible. please explain. But if you are uploading quotes, there's a couple of things that we do require. They need to be clearly identifiable even to the supplier. So that means they need to be on the supplier's letterhead. We need to have a way to link them back to the supplier. They should include the supplier's name, a date, so that we can see the quote is still valid, price per item, so breakdown leading to the total, and any VAT that is charged. So they need to effectively be accurate quotes. So a fairly critical question, which I'm sure people will ask, can things change? Specifically, can they change between the pre-qualification questionnaire and the application? Yes, they can, is the simple answer. We do appreciate that putting in a PQQ is going to be your best estimate for start dates, end dates, costs, and so on. So we appreciate that things may well have changed between the PQQ and your application. So that's fine. But please, we would ask that you try and make the PQQ as accurate as possible in order to help us to manage the call, so that we have some sense for what level of funding is being requested through the applicants who've successfully completed PQQs. Couple of key points that I'm going to mention, because we talked about using an online portal for the PQQ and the application process. First one, fairly critical one, we cannot guarantee that the online application process is compatible with mobile technology. So we can't guarantee that if you try and do this on your phone, you will successfully be able to complete the PQQ and the application portals. Therefore, we recommend that you make sure you have access to a laptop or a PC in order to use the portals. We do suggest that you update your web browser to the most recent version. It is possible that older versions of web browsers will struggle with the portal. So we recommend that you update to the most recent version. The PQQ, and more importantly, the application form, do not have a save function within them. So that means that for the PQQ, which is much more straightforward, it's quite easy to sit down and run through it in a single session. It'll probably take about 10 minutes to do the PQQ, possibly less if you type faster. The application form will take longer because we have narrative questions. There's 2,250 words that you could type in there when you add the 4 questions together. Therefore, we're providing a template that you can draft your application in, and you can then copy and paste the answers into the portal. I think it is unlikely that you'll be able to sit down at the portal, start an application from question 1 on page 1 and go all the way through to the submit button in a single sitting, unless you've drafted it outside of the portal so that you can import, copy and paste responses in. One little point, just because we found this and we asked, the next button to move between the 3 pages of the application form is at the top right-hand corner of the form. We did look for it at the bottom of the form, which is where we would usually see them. It sits at the top right of this form. The other thing to note is that uploads, so your match funding evidence, copies of quotes and so on, have a maximum 50-character file name limit. They will not upload properly if your file name is 51 characters or more. So please make sure they have fairly short, snappy file names. So what's the next steps? As soon as you hit the submit button, your submission drops into our rolling assessment process. So effectively, we start the assessment on the application pretty much as soon as it drops into the process once you press submit. So that means you can't submit more than once, and we will process the submission that comes in first. So you press submit, excuse me, and we start the assessment process. We run through an assessment process which reviews the questions, scores the questions, as described in the earlier slide, and we carry out due diligence on the applications. There's then a shortlisting of the highest scoring applications, and those shortlisted applications go on to a grant panel. That grant panel makes the selection decisions for CBAF. And once those decisions have been made, the team will be in a position to notify everyone on or before the 1st of August, and then to start issuing the grant agreements, the grant offer letters, throughout August. And I'll talk more about the grant offer letter in a later slide. So that's my more detailed run through of the application process. I haven't got the chat on my screen. I'm not going to risk getting it back in case I break something.
That's all right, James.
Liz,
Yeah, we had
you.
one question about the number of quotes. So I've just posted back in the chat to say minimum of 1 quote, preferably 3 quotes. That will help us determine good value. And then there's another question just popped up. So can any other attachments be included other than quotes, e.g. letters of support?
We have not built in anything specifically for letters of support. It sort of depends what's being supported. What we need in terms of attachments are quotation evidence, and we need evidence of the match funding. So those are the 2 areas where we're expecting attachments to be provided and required, because the objective is to keep the process as simple and unburdensome as possible. If your letter of support relates to match funding, so we will put some money into this business in order to deliver this project if it's successful, absolutely yes, that goes under the match funding section. Otherwise, it's not something that we've asked to see. It's not something that we've built into the application form. I would suggest that you reference having that letter of support within the description of the project.
Lovely. There's quite a few questions come up, so I'm just going to cover a couple off, and then we'll probably have to move on and come back to them. I think some of them are covered in later slides. Can you apply for more than one project? For example, improved lighting in a building and insulation provided by different companies? I think possibly that.
Yes.
Yeah.
There is. So I think that there's 2 answers. Wonderful compliance answer now. Yes, you can apply more than once. There's nothing to stop a business submitting more than one application. The second part of that answer relates to the use of public money and the impact that we're looking to have with CBAF. I think it is highly unlikely that any individual company would receive more than one CBAF grant. So my advice would be to focus on the application that you are keenest to have funded and put your effort into creating that application, rather than trying to pull together 2 or 3 applications all at the same time. Okay,
there's a few other questions which I think we'll just respond to on an FAQ document, because there's quite a lot coming in and I know we need to move on. But we have got answers to all the questions that everyone's just posted, so we will share that after the call, including a link to the webinar. So you can move on, James, please.